There's a name for that specific feeling of sitting down to move money into savings and not being able to do it. Not because there's nothing to transfer, not because you forgot, because something in you pulls back before you even open the app. That pull, that specific resistance, has a name, and it is not a character flaw. This video is about why saving feels genuinely impossible when financial anxiety is part of the picture. Not harder than it should be, not a matter of needing more motivation. Impossible. The way a locked door is impossible, not the way a heavy door is impossible. By the end of this, there will be a name for what has been happening. There will be a mechanism, not a metaphor, an actual mechanism that explains why every standard piece of saving advice has failed to move the needle. And there will be one step, not a system, not a goal. One step that a brain operating under financial anxiety can actually take. Here's the pattern most people in this situation know. At some point, after a hard month or a good conversation about money or a moment of clarity at 11 p.m., there's a decision. This time it's going to be different. A number gets chosen, $50 a month, $25, whatever felt realistic. Maybe there's even a savings account open specifically for this. And for a week, maybe two, there's something that feels almost like relief. Then something happens. Not necessarily a crisis, a bill that was slightly higher than expected, a week where the grocery run went over, a Tuesday that just cost more than a Tuesday should, and the transfer doesn't happen, and then the next month, it doesn't happen either. And then, this is the part that does the most damage. The story starts. I tried, I can't. This is just how I am with money. Anyone who's been carrying this knows the specific weight of that conclusion. It doesn't feel like a temporary setback. It feels like evidence. Like the account is sitting there, empty, proving something about who you are. Here's the thing about that conclusion. It feels completely logical. You made the decision, you had the intention, you had the account, and you still didn't do it. What other explanation is there? The explanation, and this is what most financial advice never gets to, is not a character explanation. It is a brain explanation. And those are two very different things. When financial anxiety is a regular part of someone's life, not occasional worry, but the chronic low-grade kind that's always running in the background, something measurable happens in the brain. The amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection system, becomes hyperactive around anything money-related. It's not being dramatic, it's doing its job. It has learned, through experience, that money is a source of danger, so it treats money-related decisions the way it would treat any threat, with urgency, with alarm, and with a very strong preference for right now over later. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning, for long-term thinking, for imagining a future version of yourself with a cushion in the bank, gets partially sidelined. Not permanently. Not because anything is wrong with it, because the amygdala has flagged a threat. And the brain is redirecting resources to handle what feels urgent. This is not a metaphor. Research by behavioral economists Sainthil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir documented this pattern across large populations. That the experience of financial scarcity, including the feeling of scarcity, even when the numbers technically allow for more, narrows cognitive focus toward the immediate and away from the future. The brain under financial anxiety is not thinking about next month. It is managing right now. Here's what that means for saving specifically. Saving is, by definition, a future-oriented act. It requires imagining a version of yourself in a future moment. The emergency that gets handled without panic, the unexpected expense that doesn't spiral, and choosing that future self over the present one. That is exactly the cognitive operation that financial anxiety impairs first. So when the transfer doesn't happen, when the intention is real and the account is open and the money is technically there and the hand still doesn't move, that is not a willpower failure. That is a brain in threat response mode doing precisely what a brain in threat response mode does. The research on this is consistent enough that there is a name for the cognitive pattern: present bias. Under conditions of financial scarcity, real or perceived, the pull toward immediate relief over future benefit intensifies in ways that are measurable and predictable. It is not a personality trait. It is a state the brain enters under specific conditions, and this is the part that changes everything once it lands. Standard saving advice is built for a brain that is calm, future-oriented, and not perceiving money as a threat. Set a goal. Visualize the future. Automate a transfer. Build an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses. That advice is not wrong. It is wrong for this situation. It's the equivalent of designing a door handle for someone with full hand strength and then being surprised when someone with a hand injury can't open it. The door isn't the problem. The handle is the wrong design for the actual person standing in front of it. Here is what a brain managing financial anxiety actually needs before it can save. It needs the act of saving to stop reading as a threat. And the primary way a financial anxiety brain reads saving as a threat is through deprivation. The feeling that moving money out of the available pile means there will be less to manage the danger with. Even when the math says there's enough, the threat response brain is not consulting the math. It is consulting the feeling. So the design fix is not motivation. It is not a better budgeting system. It is scale. The first number in a savings practice for an anxious brain needs to be small enough that it does not trigger the deprivation response. Not small as a compromise. Small as a neurological requirement. $5 does not feel like a threat. $10 does not feel like a threat. $25 for some people still doesn't. The amount is not the point. The point is that something moves, and the brain learns slowly through repetition that the act of moving money into savings does not result in danger. That's the learning that makes future transfers possible. That's the thing every large, ambitious savings goal skipped. The failure was never that the goal was too small. The failure was that the goal was large enough to trigger the exact response that makes saving impossible for an anxious brain. This is not a discipline problem. It never was. It was a design problem. And now the design can change. For anyone who wants the structure that takes this principle and turns it into an actual 30-day practice, built specifically for brains that freeze when the numbers get large, there's a resource in the description. It's a step-by-step program designed around exactly what this video covered, starting at a scale the anxiety response can tolerate and building from there. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. The video is complete without it. But if the idea of a guided structure sounds like what's been missing, that's what it's there for. So here is what this looks like in practice. Not the system, not the plan, the one step. Before doing anything else, a number needs to be found. Not a savings goal. Not a monthly transfer amount that looks responsible on paper. A number that, when imagined moving out of the checking account, does not produce a pull of resistance in the chest. For some people, that number is $10. For some, it's $5. For some, it's $25. And for some, $25 still feels like too much, and that's accurate information, not weakness. The number is whatever produces a reaction that is closer to neutral than to alarm. That number gets transferred, once, today, or this week, manually, not automated yet, into a savings account. Not automated yet, because automation right now skips the part that matters. The part that matters is the conscious, small, chosen act, the brain noticing, I did that, and nothing bad happened. That noticing is not nothing. That noticing is the beginning of the pattern changing. Now, the objection that's probably already forming, knowing this doesn't make it easier. Understanding the mechanism doesn't move the money. That's fair. And it's partly true. Understanding why saving has felt impossible does not automatically make the transfer happen. But here's what it does change. Before this video, the effort was being spent on trying to override the anxiety with willpower, which doesn't work because willpower operates in the prefrontal cortex, and the prefrontal cortex is partially offline when the threat response is active. That's why the same person who is disciplined at work, who shows up, who handles hard things, can't seem to move $25 into savings. It is not a character inconsistency, it is a neurological one. After this video, the effort can go somewhere different. Not toward overriding the anxiety, toward designing around it. Finding the number that doesn't trigger the response, moving it once, letting the brain have the experience of, I did that, and I'm still okay. That is a fundamentally different action than the one that's been failing. And it has a fundamentally different chance of working. If this opens something and there's a pull toward a more structured version of the next step, a 30-day approach built around exactly this principle, the link in the description and the pinned comment will take you there. It was built for this specific starting point, not for a brain that's already calm about money. What's the number that feels small enough to not be scary? And why do you think that number is where it is for you? So here is what's known now that wasn't known at the start. The inability to save when financial anxiety is present is not a discipline failure. It is the predictable output of a brain in threat response mode being handed a tool designed for a brain that isn't. Saving requires future orientation. Anxiety suppresses future orientation. Standard saving advice assumes future orientation is available. That's the mismatch. That was always the mismatch. And the way through it is not more motivation or a better spreadsheet or a stronger commitment. It is scale. A first number small enough that the amygdala doesn't read it as deprivation. A single manual transfer. A brain that gets to learn once, and then again, that moving money into savings does not result in danger. That learning is slow. It is not dramatic. It does not feel like progress the way a large savings goal feels like progress. But it is the kind of progress that actually accumulates for a brain like this one, because it doesn't trigger the response that has been erasing every previous attempt. One step, not a system. Transfer one amount. Whatever number produce something closer to neutral than to alarm before the next time money comes up in the mental rotation. That's the whole ask. The person who watched this video through to here is not someone who has given up on this. That person is someone who kept looking for an explanation that actually fit. That is not the behavior of someone who is bad with money. That is the behavior of someone who is figuring out what the right tool actually looks like. And now there's a little more to work with.